go ahead and resume our research exchange here. Up next, we have Naitian, first year student, who's going to talk to us about memes. Welcome, Naitian.
All right. Hello, welcome. I'm Naitian. Like David said, I'm a first year PhD student. I'm advised by David. And I'm going to be talking about some ongoing work that I've been doing with David and also David Jurgens at the University of Michigan. Yes, this talk is about memes, which are, yes, a very fun topic to study, but also very important to study because at a fundamental level, they are these like widely shared artifacts that encode cultural knowledge. And what makes them particularly interesting is that they often encode this knowledge in a highly structured way. So as an example of what I'm talking about, take this meme about TensorFlow and PyTorch. It's intended for a specific audience. If you're not in the deep learning, machine learning community, you might not understand the meme, but you might understand this one. And so, memes encode like community-specific values and attitudes. And the question of how they do that and how we can teach computers to process them and extract this sort of information is what I'm exploring in this project. So specifically, we're interested in using memes to study how communities might be similar or different in the way that they use memes. We are also interested in learning, can we actually learn what the semantics of these meme templates are? And finally, how can we use memes to mine for cultural knowledge? Okay, so just a little bit about the data set that I'm using. To construct the data set, I use the mecca of internet memes, which is Reddit. We take the top 1,000 subreddits that have meme in the title, and we get all of the images from the subreddits from around 2011 up through 2020. So that works out to over 200 million images. And finally, we use a combination of perceptual hashing and a mix of clustering techniques to combine visually similar images into templates. And so to talk a little bit about community level variation, I do this proof of concept looking at meme template usage. So at this step, we're just ignoring the semantics of the templates and instead just looking at whether a given community uses a given template. And so I constructed a co-occurrence matrix of subreddits and the meme templates that they use. And using this matrix, I projected subreddits into a lower dimensional space. And you can see that we get this interesting result where this lower dimensional space is actually semantically meaningful. So you can see that like semantically similar subreddits like political subreddits or math memes and physics memes, they get put closer together, like catapult memes and trebuchet memes. And this was a little surprising since we're just looking at the templates, which theoretically don't encode any content, right? So we're just looking at like variation and like the types of templates that people use. At least that's like theoretically true. In practice, right? Like the trebuchet memes uses meme templates with trebuchets. So like a lot of the variation that we're capturing here is like kind of this topical variation. And like, of course, different communities talk about different topics. So like this sort of variation isn't as interesting to study. What we're really interested in is like, if we can control for what people are saying with the memes, what templates do they use, right? And so to get at that level of variation, we really have to understand like the semantics of the templates. Okay, so then let's talk about some template semantics, right? So if we think about memes as this like construction of the template and the fills, we know that the template doesn't give us the whole meaning and the fills don't give us the whole meaning. And it's really like in combination that we understand the meaning of the meme, right? And in fact, a lot of times, like these templates encode some sort of relationship between the fills. So in the case of the Drake meme, it's saying that like A is better than B, right? And so what does it mean for two templates to be semantically similar to each other? Well, one way that we can think about it is if they encode the same relationship, right? So you might say that the red dress template and the Drake template are semantically similar or even equivalent. So with this idea, we can draw on the idea of distributional semantics in natural language processing, which is basically like the notion of the meaning of a word is learned through its statistical co-occurrences in context of other words, right? So if bicycle and scooter appear in similar contexts a lot, then they might be semantically similar. Tomato does not as much, so it's probably not. And we can apply this to memes, right? By saying, instead of words in context of other words, we look at meme templates in the context of the fills, right? So here we use optical character recognition to extract the text that gets inserted into memes. And the intuition is that similar meme templates will have similar texts in aggregate. And so we learned these dense vector representations of meme templates, and we use these to uncover like functionally similar templates or like semantically similar templates, right? And so what we can actually do, right, is we can like take one template, for example, like this like declarative Lisa Simpson meme, right? And we can query for the nearest neighbors of this template. And what we get are other memes that also serve that sort of like declarative function. Same thing with like this galaxy brain template, right? It encodes like this scalar, like increasing scale. And so we get like the fancy Winnie the Pooh or like the Great meme, which also encode like an increasing scale. And finally, like this one has like encodes like kind of surprise between the two frames, or like subversion of expectations. And we end up with similar functions. Okay, so that kind of takes us to where I'm at with this project now, right? Which is that we have like, we've shown that like learning semantics is important and useful. And we have like this proof of concept for learning semantic representations. And right now, the way that we do that is we use the presence of words as the signal. This has a few limitations, right? There's a lot of information that like we're kind of excluding that could be useful for learning the semantics. And so what I'm working on is trying to incorporate those as well. So some examples are the structure of the template. So for example, like the actual positional relations between like the fills, right? So you put one thing on top and one thing at bottom, and that might be meaningful. Or at least the notion that like they are separate things like on top and bottom, right? You're also missing like the semantics of the words. So right now we're just looking at like the presence of PyTorch or the presence of TensorFlow, but like we don't have any representation of like what PyTorch means or what TensorFlow means. And that would also be useful in learning what the templates mean. And finally, we aren't currently looking at the semantics of the template image. So for example, it would be very useful to know that in the bottom left pane, right, Drake has like a approving face, right? Like that's helpful to know what this template is saying. But okay, so like supposing that we like build a good semantic representation of templates, what can we do with this, right? So the first thing we can do is we can revisit that community variation that we were talking about earlier on a more granular level. So in sociolinguistics, like when we talk about a variable, what we care about is like different ways to say the same thing, right? So for example, you can say like Coke or soda or pop, depending on like where you grew up or like who you're talking to. But in all cases, these are referring to the same thing, right? So we want to have that sort of like semantic equivalence. And so just as there's like this equivalence class of Coke and soda and pop, we can build these semantic equivalence classes of these memes from the representations that we have, right? And then we can look within these equivalence classes and say, okay, so if you're trying to make like a statement about like increasing scale, right? then what template might you choose? And how might that vary based on like what communities you participate in, right? Another thing that we can do then with this template representation is actually extracting this knowledge, right? So even if you don't know anything about TensorFlow or PyTorch, or if you don't know anything about the relationship between Stanford and Cal, right? Like looking at these memes, because you know what the Drake meme does, you can actually like figure out, you know, at least like whatever the user who posted these memes thinks about these things, right? And so that's actually like very interesting information to like get, right? And especially because a lot of times memes are being shared in like very casual colloquial like conversation, right? And so a lot of times they're more likely to encode like these more like implicit or subjective opinions about things that you might not find in written resources like books or websites, right? And so memes can be like this very rich source of structured cultural knowledge. And it'd be very interesting to extract them. And with these template representations, right, we can say, well, okay, this is how all of the increasing scale templates work, right? So how can we apply that to understand like a specific thing? Okay, so to wrap up, memes are important to study. And in order to better understand memes, you really have to understand the semantics of memes. Because by having the semantics of these memes, you can learn about how these different communities use memes differently and understand community variation that way. And you can also extract cultural knowledge that's often encoded implicitly in these memes. Yeah, thanks.
Time for some questions.
Yeah, I have to take questions. Yes.
Can you go back to your table at the beginning, like where you were talking about different types of templates and communities that you're using? I mean, I can just ask you. You don't have to go.
Like this, or
it was like all the way at the beginning when you had like the count, the like raw counts.
Oh yeah, these are fake numbers. But yeah.
Do you have any intuition of what's going on here? Like why are these template types favored by different types of communities, and what values are they like assigning to the templates themselves, or like the, you know, I guess everything in there.
Yeah. So like the question is like, do you really know like why this works? Right. Like and the answer is like it's pretty hard to say. And I think like one reason why it happens to work so well is because like there are these like templates that are very like localized to specific communities. And so like if you have a picture of a trebuchet, you're probably in the trebuchet meme or catapult meme subreddit. And so that's kind of like, you know, and so I think that's like probably the simplest explanation why, but that's also like not very interesting to know, right? Which is why like by controlling for the semantics, we might be able to like skip past this level of variation and look at like more interesting, like more granular variation within this semantic
So this
class.
was true for all the communities and all the template types like matched. I mean, I believe you. I think that makes a ton of sense. But like, I also think that like there are some memes that are just much more generic, and I think they've been around longer. So I wonder if the effect starts to weaken.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it does. I mean, so like I think the problem is like with the presence of these, it's hard to like disentangle the ones that are more generic, but that is probably why you get like this, you know, this big clump in the middle here, right? Is that like, you know, it's like the daily memes and the memes, you know, like the more generic memes. And then maybe like for more specialized topical ones, you have like, they're a bit farther apart, right? Yeah. Yes.
You seem to assume that the meaning of a meme is fixed. It's not true of words.
Yes, that's true. That's a simplifying assumption, right?
This slide suggests an additional opportunity. Communities could be characterized by the way they use templates.
Yes.
With words, the connotation tends to be unstable. And I would imagine that there'd be lots of opportunities for exploring the connotation of memes.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the difficulty arises in that you have several free variables, right? So you have like what the fills are, you have what the templates are, and you have what the communities think. And you have to fix two of them in order to learn the other one, right? And so in this case, I choose to fix the like what people think memes mean and what like words are, or like what the words mean in order to learn what the templates are. But you're right that like, you know, different communities might employ meme templates differently, right? In which case you would have to like have a representation of, you would have to have like some semantic representation of, or you know, some sort of representation of meme templates and fix the template representation and the word representation, and then learn like the representation of like how these different communities combine them, right? And so, yeah, I think that would be very interesting, but I guess that is separate from learning the semantics in this way. Yeah. Yeah.
This was really great. I adore this research, so thank you for presenting. I'm sorry because I have a methods question. Weird. I feel like I have a sense for how you could have a data set of 200 million images, yeah, and how you could do OCR on them to pull out the text or like match templates that are visually similar. Mm-hmm. But some of the things you mentioned about pulling out the semantics of the structure or the semantics of the image sound much more methodologically complicated. Do you have ideas for how to go about doing that?
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot harder, which is why I haven't done it yet. Okay, let me go to that slide and then I can talk about some ideas. I mean, okay, so some of these are easier than others, right? Or like, I think actually like, you know, the semantics of words is kind of like a solved problem, or like at least like a heavily studied problem by itself. And so it's the semantics of like images, right? And then like the idea of like the structure and like the position of these things, it's kind of, there, you know, like there's the, if you take like the words approach to it, then it's like, you can think of it as just like a sequence, right? So like, you know, if you have like the Drake meme with like these fills, then you have the Drake meme and then like what comes in fill A and what comes in like, you know, space A and space B, right? And so, you know, transformers learn like sequences as well. If you come at it from like the vision space, right, then like positions of things are where you use like CNNs, right? So maybe you like, you know, potentially I thought about like straight up just learning memes without doing all of this like pre-processing, right? And just like seeing what sort of like representation I can get from that. Something that has been coming into recent popularity is like masked autoencoders, which is like you have like an image and then you like mask out sections of it and try to predict what goes inside. And that seems like a very like relevant task, right? So maybe like those would work to learn the semantic representations, but I'm not sure yet. Yeah.
Well, does it need to be? I mean, I know nothing about this, so I know what memes are. I know how to study them. But surely things like just the number of panels and basic things like that tell you already give you a lot of information, right? Or is that not a good assumption to make?
That's true when you have panels.
Sure.
But there's like a lot of like, I don't know if you know like the butterfly meme. It's like this guy with a hand and like a butterfly. It's like, is this a butterfly? But like in those, like, you know, people just like put the text on top and then you don't have like the same sort of like structure, right? I think like the one main thing that I've learned in this project is that there's like so much variance in just like the different types of templates there are. that, you know, that's what makes working with this like difficult.
All right, let's start right here.